Hey everyone, this is Troy Davis with Spotlight News and YSN Live. We're here today at the Pro Football Hall of Fame for the incoming class in their press conference. We're going to hear from Brees, Larry Fitzgerald, Luke Kuechly. We're going to hear from Roger Craig and Adam Vinatieri. We're going to have a chance to see all of them during their press conference. The whole thing will be there for you to see on YSN Live and Spotlight News.
Now you can see every school, to the smallest school, to the intermediate schools, to the schools in the outlying areas. It gives you coverage that you could just never get to before. It's something that's great to experience, and it's opened up a whole new wave of sports viewership. The possibilities are endless here at YSN. Push the envelope every day. Try something new. If it works, great. If it doesn't, well, let's try another angle, and we just keep moving forward. My name is Mike Ackelson, and my sports network is your sports network.
All right. How's everybody doing today? Cool.
Adam, just want to start with just what you've experienced so far, just a general sense of being here.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Obviously, we got in yesterday. It's been 7 months since we got the knock on the door. It's been an incredible ride so far. Tons of fun. It's overwhelming for sure, but this thing's giving me a little feedback. Sorry, but yeah, it's been absolutely incredible. Just getting here yesterday and meeting the fans at the hotel and all the signage on the wall. You know, this is obviously a dream come true. I've always dreamt of, as a kid, just playing in the National Football League and trying to help your team win games. And then all of a sudden, after a long career, getting that knock on the door and being here and thinking that, like you said, 387 of us get the honor to put on this jacket. And man, I can't wait. I'm excited. I'm nervous for my speech a little bit, but it's going to be a great time.
Adam, we're just going to go back and forth from the two microphones. We'll start on this side.
Absolutely.
Just come from the golf course.
I wish I had time.
Chris Hagan, Fox 59, Indianapolis. Let's get a couple for you. One, when you were playing with New England and with the Colts, you were surrounded by greatness and guys you probably figured were Hall of Famers. At any point, did you figure, hey, I'm doing something special here, even when you stacked up all the years, or was it something you look back on maybe now?
You know, I really never thought about it too much when I was playing. I was always kind of had blinders on, was always looking forward my entire career. Like, what can I do to be better? What can I do to help the team? How can we get our team to the next level? Or how can we maintain a championship type of caliber in the locker room? So, you know, maybe after a couple of the game-winning Super Bowls, you know, you start hearing people talk about it like, hey, you know, you've done some great things. And, you know, you meet a guy like Chris Berman who says, man, you're going to get in, you know, and then I guess in the back of your mind, you hope that that's maybe a possibility later on. But, you know, every year I felt like I needed to put a new chapter in my book, an exclamation point on my career. And early in my career, I remember playing against Morton Anderson, and I believe he was in Atlanta at the time. And I was just a few years in the league, and I was so awestruck just being on the same field with him and you know, just admiring his career and the amount of points. And I just said, you know, like I said, I was dumbfounded. I just sat there and said, like, nobody's ever going to touch your records, right? Like it's so far out there, 25 years. I'm like, there's no way. And then, you know, obviously leaving New England after 10 seasons and going to the Colts, I just kept putting years together, stacking years. And I was so very fortunate to play on two amazing organizations with, like you said, Hall of Fame caliber guys, right? I mean, when it's all done and said, both of the organizations are going to have lots of guys that have gold jackets. So in my mind, it was just such a blessing. And, you know, once we finally got toward the end of the career and I was looking at it going, hey, you know, Morton's record's out there and it's a few years away if I can stay healthy. You know, that became, you're always wanting to win championships. You're always wanting to you know, hosting the Lombardi Trophy. But at that point, I was like, maybe I can catch him. And at that point, I think that maybe was the one time once we were in Oakland and I kicked that chip shot field goal and surpassed his all-time leading scorer record. at that point, I thought there was a real good chance, but I never took it for granted. I never thought that it was a sure thing. You know, there's so many great players. You know, every year they make the list of the guys that are nominated for the Hall of Fame, and I'm dumbfounded on how they can figure out how you can whittle it down to 4, 5, 6 guys. You know, because there's so many guys that are worthy of that. So. Yeah, you know, I never wanted to assume anything until I got the knock on the door and I opened up the door. And then, if any of you guys saw that, the tidal wave of emotion that came over my face, because then it became real. You know, I knew it was either the year before, you know, the first time that I got nominated, I got that phone call that said, sorry, man, you made the finals, but you didn't make the final cut. You know, so yeah, you know, you never ever take it for granted, for sure. And at that point, when I got the knock on the door, it was kind of almost waterworks. I was trying to hide them, but I don't think I got away with it.
You mentioned New England. It's not unusual for a player to leave one team for another, but at that moment in time, when the Patriots and Colts were to each other as rivals, could you just talk us through a little bit about how that transpired? And obviously, it worked out very well for you.
Yeah. All the respect in the world for the New England Patriots. I loved playing there. I loved being a teammate there. We had world-class athletes, and you know, when you win a bunch of Super Bowls, it's a lot of fun. But I played 10 years there and never saw free agency, and I was fine with that, right? But at that point, I knew I was still young enough to play a long time, and I thought I put enough together that I was hoping that they wanted to keep me around for a long time, and the contract was not really there, and the Colts did everything right. I mean, Bill Polian, who was putting my gold jacket on me on Friday night, he said, "We want you here. We'll do whatever it takes to get you here," and it was a huge honor. And I had all the respect in the world for the Indianapolis Colts. I mean, they were the toughest team that we always faced at the end of the playoffs, and it was either them or us going to the Super Bowl. When I say us, I was still in New England at the time, obviously. And so I knew they were a great team. I knew what Peyton and Marv and Reg and Dwight and you know, I mean, they just had so many studs on their team. So when he called, I was like, I wouldn't want to leave a great organization and just go anywhere. It had to be the right place. And it was the right place. I have absolutely no regrets. It's a wonderful 14 years that I played there. Couldn't have asked for anything more. And it was truly magical getting there and winning the Super Bowl the first year that I was there. You know, helping be a small part in getting over the hurdle and hosting the Lombardi Trophy. That was amazing.
Congratulations, Dave Boardwalk in South Dakota News Media Association.
All right.
You had a terrific career at South Dakota State University, playing for the Jackrabbits as both a place kicker and a punter. But you had some challenges along the way as well when you were in college. Can you talk about when you're finishing college, coming out of college, how was it that you had that dream to get to the NFL? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Obviously, all of us progress in a certain way. I was a solid punter and kicker, but I wasn't. I needed a little work still. I mean, I think that's the major thing that, you know, some of the young kids, high school kids or college kids, and I always tell them, I'm like, listen, my skill level developed not only through high school and college, but even in the National Football League. I became more consistent. Probably mentally I became better as we went along. And you know, I was fortunate enough when I was there, a gentleman by the name of Adam Timmerman was getting drafted by the Green Bay Packers. So we had a lot of scouts there, and they always were checking him out. I mean, that's why they were there. But they were talking to me a little bit, so I got a little extra love, I guess, at that point. And obviously, I did not get drafted, but I did talk to a handful of teams, and I knew I was maybe being naive. I thought I was closer than maybe I was, but I moved to Virginia. Well, let me back up a second. Brian Hansen, who was the punter for the New York Jets at the time, was a South Dakota guy as well, and I met up with him. We worked out. He introduced me to a kicking coach by the name of Doug Blevins, who was a handicapped gentleman in a wheelchair and lived in Abingdon, Virginia. I moved there, worked with him for a season, and then the Amsterdam Admirals drafted me, and I spent one season in NFL Europe, and it was the greatest decision of my life. It was a great time. I enjoyed Europe. I enjoyed playing at that level. It was my first opportunity to play professional football, right? A schedule that's just football and not school and football. And I believe that really, really helped me along the way. New England saw me there, offered me a contract, and the rest is history, as you say. So, yeah, I really appreciate coming from South Dakota, playing at South Dakota State. I appreciate the struggle that I had to get there. I think I can appreciate, not to say that the superstar guys that came right out of college, you know, the number one draft choices didn't have a struggle, but I think my journey was a little different than some. But I think that's what made it so much more rewarding and so much more fulfilling to me.
Hey, I'm congrats. Corey Cutler of the QE out of Quad Cities. I know you've had some interactions with the rest of the class. Specifically, I want to ask you about Roger Craig. What have your interactions been with him? What does it mean to have him part of this class?
Oh, I love Roger. He is an incredible man. He's always got a smile on his face. The thing that I love the most about Roger is when you see him, he just gives you a hug. He's got a smile on his face, and he is so thankful. I think we're all super thankful that we're here, but you know, he just brightens the day when you're around him, and he's obviously the veteran in our group, if you will. He played before us, but I remember watching him, you know, back in the day when Montana to Rice and Craig and this and that. Like I didn't play running back, but utmost respect for him. I think he was one of the first guys to go 1,000 and 1,000, right? So I mean, that's very, very important. Not impossible, but very, very hard to do, right? So he's a wonderful man and well overdue, and I'm just so happy that he's part of our class. I can't say enough how honored I am, not only to be in the Hall of Fame, but this class is amazing. Like every one of the guys, you know, are just class acts, just pros. I mean, man, I love the class, and I'm just so honored because being part of this fraternity and this group of men is just something in itself. But to be with these other four gentlemen and knowing that I get to be around these guys the rest of my life it's pretty awesome.
Congratulations, Ethan Brown, USA Today. I know you mentioned earlier the importance of catching awards, his record, or the longevity of your career in general. What did that mean to you to just have such a long, consistent, successful career for you guys?
Yeah, I think maybe that's even more than any individual moment. I think the longevity part is the thing that I'm probably the most proud of, because it's so difficult to keep yourself at a high level for a long time. If you play football, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when and how often you're going to have an injury or you're going to have to go through stuff. And I was blessed to have some very, very important people in my life that helped me stay healthy, that guided me in the right way. And I think I met some people early in my career that taught me to take care of your body, eat right, sleep, all the little things. And that's just the things that I tell my high school kids when I'm coaching them. I'm like, you know, optimize yourself the best possible, because 1%, one little thing could turn out to be a big thing later on. And, you know, you think kickers, you know, we don't make a lot of tackles or this or that, but I've had numerous surgeries like everybody else, just from wear and tear, just over years. So I think the longevity part is the one thing that I'm the most proud of, because it's one thing to get to the NFL. It's another thing to be able to perform well enough to stay there for a long time. And even our position in particular, you're a guy that better be 80-some% every single year, or they're looking to replace you, right? You know, you have not even one bad year, one bad game, and all of a sudden they're thinking, man, you know, should we do something else? So to be able to focus in and day out, week in and week out, and put your best foot out there and be able to perform every week and every year. And I think for me, one of my things that I always try to do is at the end of the season, I would look back on my season, I'd critique, like, what can I do better? How can I be the best player possible to help my team win games? And that's really what I strive to do. And I think the older you get, it's one thing, you know, when you're in your 20s, it's pretty easy to keep your body fat down and your weight where you need to be, and it's easy to lift and do all that to keep your body going. But when you hit 40 plus years old, it becomes much more difficult. And so it becomes much more work to stay at that level. So I think that's the thing that I'm really, really proud of, just to be able to maintain that. And although my last season, I was dealing with a few injuries and stuff, and it wasn't statistically my best year, but some of my best years were toward the end of my career, and pretty proud of that, to be honest with you.
I know you selected to have Carly Gordon introduce you on Saturday. Can you talk a little bit about that relationship and the Ursay family and what they meant to you in your career?
Absolutely, absolutely. Wonderful, wonderful family. I only played for 2 organizations, so I can't speak through the other 32 organizations out there. But a little bit of this is in my speech, so I'm not gonna give it all. But they love their team. They'll do anything they can to help make sure that we're successful. Jim was a rock star. Loved the guy. He would do anything for anybody at any time, and just such a family guy, and loved his daughters, loved his team. He was grassroots guy, right? He always told the stories that when he was a young kid, he was in the locker room picking up socks and jocks and doing the equipment guy stuff to start with, because he needed to figure out, like, he needed to see it at the grassroots. And I appreciate that, because you are the owner of a team, but there's nothing too big or too small that you wouldn't do to be right there where it needs to be. So I'm really, really proud of the Ursay girls and how they're honoring their father. Carly, she's been in the locker room. She's been in meetings. She's on the sideline with the headset, and she's hearing the plays. Like, she didn't want to just be an owner. She wanted to understand what was going on. She wanted to know the plays and what's going. She felt like she needed to know all of the assets of football to understand what's going on, and I respect the heck out of that for her doing that. Again, we've had a lot of conversations over the past few years, and I really respect her. And NFL football ownership is kind of the old boys club, if you will, but she's taken the bull by the horns, and she's doing a wonderful job, and I couldn't be more proud of her.
Hey, congrats, Adam. Michael Houlihan, WZIP, University of Akron. I want to talk about your teammate, Pat McAfee. I say he's definitely a funny guy, but he's the king of storytelling. One of my favorite stories is he got drafted to be your holder, and he never held for a kicker in his life. How is that from your perspective?
Yeah, I've heard him tell the story, and it's about 99% true, honestly. I mean, everybody sits there and goes, that's got to be embellished. It's not. The first time I met him, he came in, oh man, what an honor to be around you. Hopefully you're not mad at me, but I lied to Bill Polian before I got drafted and told him that I've never held a day in my life. And I think my heart sank, and I was just like, holy cow. Like, now all of a sudden in the middle of my career, you're like, hey kid, I'm trying to do some good stuff here. And you're lying to the GM, and now I got to deal with a dude that's never done it before. We're starting from day one, scratch. I'm not going to lie. It made me really nervous, but one of the first things I did, I said, all right, handed him a plane ticket, flew out to a guy by the name of Ken Walters, who was my holder a bunch of years in New England. He held for me for the 2 Super Bowl kicks. Love Kenny. He taught me a little bit about kicking, because he taught me the lean of the ball can affect the flight of the ball. Like he's just like, I'm going to get it there for you, dude. I'm going to make your job as easy as possible. So I knew that there was absolutely nobody else that needed to help Pat other than that. So I said, you're going there for 4 days. You're gonna just soak in all the knowledge. And I called Kenny first, and I was like, hey man, you mind? And he's like, absolutely, anything for you, bud. So Pat flew out there. He did it, and to Pat's credit, he's a funny guy. He's the jokester of the world. Like, I love the man. He's a very hard worker, and he takes things very serious. And we always had tons of fun on the practice field, in the games, the stuff that he would be yelling across the field to the other dudes. I'm like, oh my God, you're going to get us in trouble. But he took it very seriously. And when he said, Vinny would throw me 500 balls in my room at night before we'd go to bed in training camp, that was real. I'm sure I wore him out, right? I mean, he just was probably like, oh my gosh, but I wanted to make sure he understood how important it was. And he knew, I mean, he absolutely knew, and he did a great job. And, you know, there may be a few times where it's a tough snap or it's not a perfect hold, but I tell you what, he did an unbelievable job. He became one of my favorite guys. And yeah, he just all the respect in the world to him and Kenny for helping him out. But Pat, he's a funny dude, but when he puts his mind to something, he can do damn near anything.
Hi, Antonio Rosé from the West Coast Gazette. Congratulations, by the way. I really just wanted to ask, like, how much does it mean to you to have your family out here this weekend too, and how important is family support been for your 24 years?
Oh, it's absolutely incredible, and I'll touch a bunch on that during my speech. So again, you guys keep asking me stuff, and boom, it pulls right into the stuff that I've been thinking about these last few months and trying to put into a speech or onto paper, thinking about what that means. But you're absolutely right. From my childhood, growing up as a kid, all the way through the support my wife gave me and my children, I mean, they're my why. Honestly, I mean, I love football. I love everything about it. I love running out onto the field, but they're the reason why I did and did as much as I did. You know, the love of the game, the love of football is obviously there, but couldn't have done it without, you know, people have to know, obviously we can't make it to this stage or have a gold jacket on without a help of a ton of people. And my support cast, my parents, my siblings, my wife and kids and coaches and teachers. I mean, there's so many people out there that I definitely could not and would not be here today without them. You bet.
Hey, Adam, congratulations. Troy Davis from Spotlight News and YSN. Just talk to us a little bit about how a great football player like you that also kicks prepares himself mentally in those closing seconds of the games and those such big kicks that you had. And, you know, you won games or put them into overtime, that kind of thing. What's going through your mind as everybody's out there on the field and you're preparing for that kick?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, you know, as a kid, I always played sports, and I played multiple sports year-round: soccer, football, wrestling, baseball. In every sport that I played in, I always wanted to be right in the middle of the action, right? So center midfield in soccer. I was a catcher in baseball. Played quarterback also in football because I wanted the game to come down to if I knew I was going to work hard, and I trusted the fact that I hoped that the game was going to be dictated on my play, because it was one of those things I've heard Kobe Bryant talk about. He's like, I trust me because I know what effort and what I've done to get to the point that I'm at. So in my mind, I just always wanted to be around the ball or to be one of the reasons that we were successful, or maybe that we lost because I didn't play well enough, but I knew that I would put the effort in. So I guess to answer your question, what I enjoyed pressure, I guess. Jeff Saturday was one of my teammates in training camp. He always said, man, I wish I was a kicker, except for on Sundays, because he didn't want that, right? And I guess so you have to kind of embrace that as this position. You have to say, I know that there's going to be numerous games that are going to come down to my foot, win or lose. And I didn't make them all. I made most of them, but I didn't make them all, obviously. But, you know, that's one of the things that you couldn't shy away from. People used to love to ask me, hey, would you rather have a game-winning kick? And I'm like, no, I'd rather win by 35 points. You know, fourth quarter, I'm waving to my family in the crowd, drinking Gatorade. There's no stress, right? But on the retrospect, if it's coming down to a game-winning kick, I absolutely wanted it to be me rather than I'm sitting on the sideline hoping that the other kicker misses, because I have no control in that, right? So I just always felt like if you could zone in and block out all of the noise and just, like I tell kids that are kickers, I said, just rely on your little 3-yard box, right? You can't block for the guys up front. You can't snap the ball. The only thing that you can do is when the ball gets snapped and the ball gets placed, you can control your little window. It doesn't matter who's yelling, what the game means, what's on the line. And for me, that helped kind of calm my mind a little bit, you know, and then it really always just came down to the process, right? Trust your process, right? Super Bowl kick in Super Bowl 31, 48-yarder against the Rams. I knew when I got out on the field, I'm like, You've kicked this kick 10,000 times in the past, right? Nothing changes other than the pressure that you put onto yourself. Rely on your technique and trust your process. And thankfully, when I looked up, it was dead center, and I'm running on the sideline cheering. So I think that's what helped me. I love the Mariano. I'm a Red Sox fan, but Mariano Rivera, Sandman, he was the dude, right? Because every time he walked onto the field, it was like, boom, they're going to win, right? Michael Jordan didn't make every shot, but he wanted it, and most of the time he made it. So by no means am I comparing myself to those greats, but I just loved people who didn't shy away from the pressure. They're like, I wanted the game to come down to me because I'm going to win this sucker. You bet. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you.
Joe Dickey Electric. No job is too big or too small. With over 65 years of commercial, industrial, residential, and 24/7 emergency services, you can trust the experts at Joe Dickey Electric because we are everything electrical.
Larry, over here, Dave Stevens with the Disability Channel. We go back from your days as a ball boy, and you told me once I was your hero because I played college football. But I'm wondering, again, with what do you have on your cell phone of your mother's voice and what just happened with your father? I mean, what is this like to you knowing they're not here and how much that would have meant to them?
I try to think more about, I know they're here with me in spirit, and their sacrifices for me and my family, my brother and all of us, is not in vain, and I know, being a Pro Football Hall of Famer is an unbelievable accomplishment, but, they were more so focused on us and our development as young men and making sure we were good citizens of society, and we thought about our communities, and, we happened to play sports and got better at those things, but I think, the thing is that they never over prioritized it. It was a means to an end, right? And I know that they're looking down and they're very happy, and I'm even more thankful for what they did to put me in position to be successful. And so I try to take solace in that.
And I got to know your dad so well in Minnesota. Was just an amazing journalist. And we would sit in the press box. I was at a game in Arizona. You caught your first, I believe, only 2-point conversion. And your dad was just so proud because of that magical moment. But of all those memories of the things that crossed the way through college and everything, is there that one defining moment that sticks out in your brain that you sit back and that flashes back in your mind?
Yeah, so I was my freshman year of college. I'm 18 years old, and we're playing in Blacksburg, Virginia, against Virginia Tech. They're ranked, I think, number 3 in the country. It's my first nationally televised game. And my brother played a game earlier that day in Huntington, West Virginia. So my dad quickly drove from Huntington to Roanoke, Virginia, to watch my game. He forgot his coat in the transition, somehow rushing, and he didn't get access to the media press box that day. So he had to scalp a ticket, and I remember seeing him. He had a pullover, and it was cold that night. It was probably in the mid-30s, and I saw my dad. He waited for me still at the buses, and he had the nose hair shingles, and he was shaking, but he was so proud. I scored, I think, 3 touchdowns, and we ended up beating them that night, and he was just so proud. But I could just remember him literally shaking. He was shivering. That's how cold he was that night, But, it's nights like that always stand out to me because only a parent would watch a game and go that distance and make those sacrifices for your kids. And, memories like that always, stand out to me about just how loving they were. It didn't matter what was required. They would always show up.
Hey, Larry.
What's up, Mark? How you doing? Good to see you too, buddy.
Congratulations. Had a few really good chats with your dad in press boxes throughout the years as well. Just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on being an Arizona Cardinal for all 17 years, doing this with one franchise, and what's it mean to go in the Hall of Fame, having done it all in this?
Well, Mark, thanks for being here, and appreciate the questions and always the thoughtful coverage of my career too. I think the thing that, you look at the guys who've gotten in here, and there's not a ton of players, especially in the modern era, that have been able to play in the same place their entire career. And it takes two to tango, obviously. Like, your wife didn't marry you just because you wanted to marry her, she wanted to marry you. Like, it takes two to tango. And so, having a great ownership group with Mr. Bidwell and Michael and Nicole and Tim, and them wanting me to be in Arizona and wanting me to finish my career, allowing me to finish my career, it meant a lot to me. And to be able to say that Arizona is now my home and my community, that's a blessing to be able to have that. And I'm very thankful. And there's not a day that goes by that I'm not aware of it, and it's not something that I think about. As I go to coffee shops and go to sporting events and go to my kids' functions, and just how kind and nice people are to me. And I was a transplant there, right? And 22 years, it feels like a place that I couldn't imagine myself ever being without. So it's a really good feeling, and I'm very appreciative to be able to have that opportunity.
Antonio Rossetti, West Coast event in Pittsburgh. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask, Pitt, there's so many players from Pitt that are in the Hall of Fame. Now, you are as well. Just what does the University of Pittsburgh mean and the fans and coaches that you've encountered along the way?
Well, I mean, you being a Yinzer yourself, you understand the tight-knit group that the city of Pittsburgh is. Western Pennsylvania, it embodies blue-collar toughness, lunch pail mentality, and I really learned that when I got there in college. It's a great city. It's a really interesting mix. It's Midwest with a little bit of East Coast flavor to it. I learned a lot from the people there, and from my church home to chess clubs that I played at. It was a really, really special place. Got a lot of lifelong bonds with people that I was able to spend time with, and even from the Steelers, being able to get to know Mr. Rooney and so many other great Steeler people who really were very kind. I mean, Kevin Colbert, he clocked my 40-yard dash. I think he gave me like 2/10, made me a little bit extra money. They were later in the draft that year. I think they took Ben the 12th pick, but I think I probably ran like a 4.46, and Kevin gave me a 4.44. So he helped me out, and the Steelers organization was great to me. Our facilities were right next door to each other, but it was an unbelievable time to be in Pittsburgh. And the only time I felt a little contentious was 2009, the Super Bowl. I felt like all the people that supported for me at college, they turned their back on me then, but it was only for 4 hours. Yeah.
Tim McKelvey, 10 takes. Larry, first off, congratulations. Just wanted to know, obviously you're one of the greatest to ever do it, but what is one thing that you would give to the younger generation of high school and college guys, receivers just looking up to you on what they can improve on going into their season?
Well, I think it varies from each individual what you need to improve on, but I think just being open to coaching and feedback is something that I think you really need to do, because often, as humans, you don't see your own blind spots, and you need to rely on the people around you, the coaches, staff, to kind of tell you what you need to improve on, and you be humble enough to take that to heart, and often block out the tone of the message sometimes, because sometimes it's a little crass and it's a little bit tougher than what you expected, but to be able to realize that they want what's best for you. They have the best interest at hand, and really being coachable and open to feedback, I think is something that I would really stress. I stress that to my son all the time. People are not always going to be kind to you. They're not always going to tell you what you want to hear. You need to really lean into the things that people talk to you about, especially when it comes to your own personal improvement.
Hi, Larry. Congrats. Corey Cupler with WQAP out of the Quad Cities. I know you've had some interactions with this class. It's a very special class, but specifically, I want to ask you about Roger Craig. What does it mean to have him part of this class and going in with him?
It's been so cool with Mr. Craig. I had never met him before. We were inducted. I got a chance to, for the first time, before we were going over to honors, was the first time I got a chance to meet him. And, I've heard a lot, I've known Mr. Ronnie Lott for a long time. I've known Harris Barton for a long time. I've known Steve Young for a long time. Mike Wilson, Jerry Rice, you name it. Guys who have played with him, they always were talking about how kind he was and how thoughtful he was. And he exemplified all of those characteristics when we got a chance to meet him. And it's been really nice being able to meet his family and his sons. And you kind of see, how people are, through their families. And it's been a real treat for me to be able to spend time with him and, to be able to be alongside with him, as he's enshrined. 33 years is a long time to wait, for something that's, 29 years. He retired 33 years ago. It's been 29 years since he's been eligible. That's a long time to wait. And so I'm thankful to be alongside him in his class as he gets in.
Hey Larry, Ben with 10K Sports Talk Minneapolis Radio. I just wanted to say first off condolences to your father's the reason I was able to get in the media. You also are known to have one of the more, I would say, obscure records in NFL history, recording more tackles than having his drop passes. Typically, I would ask a defender who's the hardest person to tackle, but for you, who was the hardest person to tackle?
James Harrison, definitely. if I was a better tackler, I would have probably been able to get him down, and that might have changed my fate a little bit. But when I got to him, it was like, have you ever tried to move a refrigerator by yourself before? That's what it felt like, trying to move a refrigerator by yourself. So, I didn't anticipate I was going to run into granite when I hit him.
Good evening.
Hi.
Welcome to the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Thank you.
Yep. Real quick question. James Simmons, just at themedia.com. Just looking back, was there a specific game, play, or turning point where you realized you belong in the NFL?
You talking about during my NFL career or prior to?
During your pro career.
I think it was probably my second year. My first year was up and down. I didn't have a terrible year, but it wasn't great either. It was just okay. It was okay enough where people didn't start calling me a bust, but they're like, we need to see some improvement. The first game, the next season, we opened up at the Meadowlands in New York, and we lost the game, but I had 8 catches for 100 and something and a touchdown. And so I think you started to see some of the promise a little bit of my career. And then that year, I was able to, make my first Pro Bowl and have a really successful year. And I think that was kind of when I started to believe personally, I knew that I could play, but I think after that, I was like, okay, the work is starting to show up the way I hoped it would show up. And then it started to grow from that point on. But I would say that was the first time, 2005 opening week. Yeah.
Darren Urban, EasyCardinals.com. Larry, congratulations again.
Thank you, D.
So are we saying you retired? Is that what we're doing here?
No, I've not committed to retirement. I have not.
On a serious note, that though, why has that been so important of a thing for you to kind of have this be more like a metamorphosis rather than a retirement and then Hall of Fame end game type thing?
Yeah. So when I was a kid, my grandfather, I remember hearing him have a conversation with his good friend John Strogers, who was park commissioner in Chicago. They played together at Xavier college football, in the 40s. And I remember them talking about retirement killing more people in our country than anything. And so that always stuck with me. And so I just don't believe in retirement. I just think you transition into different phases, especially as an athlete. I got done playing at 38. Retire? What do you mean retire? There's no retirement in sight. And so I don't know. I protest the word more than the actual thing. So I just won't acknowledge that. Yeah. Okay.
Josh Weinberg, ESPN. Congratulations.
Thanks, Josh.
You've referenced the Super Bowl a couple times so far today. How much does it eat at you still all these years later when you look back on it, and what still stands out? And lastly, do you think you should have won?
It definitely, when you come into these environments and you're around Hall of Famers who are Super Bowl champions, last night, around like Drew Pearsons and, all of these amazing players who not only have been Hall of Famers, but they're Super Bowl champions as well. And you're like, damn, it'd been nice to be able to have both of them. And so I think when I'm in these environments, I wouldn't say like when I'm walking around or with my kids at dinner that I'm thinking about it. But when you come into these environments and these settings, I mean, Adam was just on the stage. My first Super Bowl as an adult, my dad took me to Super Bowl. Washington Redskins played against the Buffalo Bills in Minnesota. I can't remember what Super Bowl with Joe Theismann. I think Joe Theismann was the quarterback then with the Hogs and John Riggins and all those guys. But the first Super Bowl I actually attended as an adult was Houston. In Houston, when the Carolina Panthers played against the New England Patriots, and he hit the game-winning field goal. You want those type of moments. You want moments that you're immortalized. I still remember the photo when he's holding his hands up in the air like that. That will be synonymous with greatness until the end of time, right? And obviously as a kid, you dream of having those moments and falling short. It stinks. It's not fun, right? And so, yeah, you do think about it. And the second part of that question was, what was it?
Do you think you should have won the MVP after your performance?
Nah, I don't think. I think the MVP went to the right person. Santonio played really well, throughout the entire game, and Ben was phenomenal in that drive. And so I always think the Super Bowl MVP should definitely go to the team or player that played the best on the team that wins. It just, would you really want a Super Bowl MVP if you lost it? Like that doesn't. It just does. It wouldn't have the same significance. Like I have this trophy that I won, but I really didn't win. It just, I don't know, it doesn't make sense to me.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Josh.
Larry,
hey, you guys got to watch this guy right here, man. His brother will sell you some used cars that don't work, man. You got to watch Richard, man. You got to watch him. Yeah.
I love you too.
I love you back. Yeah.
I love you, I just wanted to ask you about your thought process of picking Devin, wanting your father first, but then having to pivot to what that was like, and also the same thought process for the gold jacket.
Yeah, so my dad was gonna do it for me, and in hindsight, I wish I would have been a bit more proactive. I remember seeing the schedule, and like we do the taping, normally in May or June, and I'm thinking, I think we should be okay, and I probably should have just pushed it up until March, and got it done. But it's unfortunate, but I think it's also given my son the opportunity to have a really unique experience. My son's a freshman in college. He's in training camp right now in Notre Dame. He gets to be on the same stage with Jerry Rice and Randy Moss and Michael Irvin and Chris Carter and Steve Largent and all these amazing players that have contributed to the fabric of this game. What better motivation is there for him to be able to be in that same setting, to take back to him to school, to motivate him to hopefully be the best player he possibly can be. Not to put pressure on him, but I think it's really good to visualize and be able to tangibly see and feel the things that you want in life. And I think this experience is going to do that for him. And so to be able to have him be a part of it in that way, it's a unique experience that only happens one time in a lifetime, and so I think it's pretty cool. Chris Carter's gonna put the gold jacket on me. It came down to him and Kurt, and I get a chance to spend a lot of time with Kurt, and we're very close. We talk, often, and Chris Carter was who I idolized as a child. I still remember myself in South Minneapolis. The game will go off and it'll be December and it'll be cold, icy, and we would have shoveled the snow. And Chris was known for his sideline catch and dragging his toes. And my brother would stand on the porch and throw it to me, and I would have my toes on the concrete and I would fall into the snow, and I would just do that like repetition after repetition after repetition, face full of snow and my gloves all in my shirt. And I would do that until I couldn't feel my hands anymore. And so, like, those are the memories I have as a child. So to be able to have Chris Carter, who poured into me the way he did, and made a lot of sacrifices for me to help me go to school and let me stay at his house and train with him, taught me all of these things to know that it's come full circle. And, I wouldn't have been on that stage and wouldn't have this opportunity if he didn't kind of show me the ropes. I thought that was pretty cool and a great way to pay homage to my past.
Hi there, Doug Allen with The Athletic. Good to see you.
What's up, Doug? How you doing?
You talked about just your time at the Cardinals and how it's like a marriage. You talked about the disappointment of losing the Super Bowl. As you got later into your career, you went through some difficult times with the Cardinals. Was there ever a time when you were tempted to look elsewhere, maybe position yourself for another chance at the Super Bowl?
I would be lying to you if it didn't cross my mind. I didn't think about it. Even had conversations about it, but never seriously tried to put it in motion. I loved where I was at, and quite frankly, I don't know if it would have meant the same for me if I'd have went to somewhere who was already some super team. I was just a part of that super team that already existed before I got there. There would be a cheapness that I would feel about it personally, and it's no knock on anybody else that does it that way, but I was a part of that foundation, and I remember getting drafted and meeting Darnell Dockett for the first time, and meeting Antonio Smith and Carlos Dansby and Alex Ivanovich, and being around those guys and wanting to do something that hadn't been done in Arizona, and like that meant something to me, to be a part of the fabric and the foundation of an organization and turn it around. That's something that 40 years from now, when you're in a wheelchair or in a cane, and you're talking about that with people who were part of it and there, that mattered to me. And so I never really pushed for that. I wanted to do it all in Arizona. Yeah.
Hey Larry, Tyler Drake, Arizona Sports. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you too.
When it comes to Randy Moss, obviously it's a big part of your life. What's been the best piece of advice that he's given you, and how has that maybe helped mold you throughout your career?
Well, I saw a lot of great things from Moss in terms of his competitive spirit, his kindness, his thoughtfulness to me. I think Randy's pretty misunderstood. He's truly not one that's like looking for new friends. Like he doesn't really need that. But the people that he does care about and he respects, he's the best friend you can have. If you have one phone call for somebody that you need to show up for you, Moss would be like one of those type of people. And he's been great to me since the time I was 14, going on 15 in 1998, and I still have that same relationship with him, even though it's evolved now. I'm a man now, but he still is very kind and thoughtful to me. So like to be able to be in the same fraternity with him for life is really special.
Hey Larry, Jen, Kelly Strong, Disability Network. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing great. It's a blessing that Devin's going to be presenting for you.
Yeah.
And then to honor your dad, what's one of the lessons that you're going to pass down to the next generation to Devin?
Well, I think one of the things that I really admire about Pops is he wasn't an excuse maker. He never, well, because of this, we couldn't do this, and because of that, we couldn't. I literally never heard him ever make up some excuse. He was we're gonna figure it out. Let's find a solution. If we got to go this way, or we got to go over it, or we got to go under it, we got to go through it. Whatever that was like impeding what we're trying to do. He was a solution-oriented person, and so I really stress those things to Devin. It's these young people, I think, with so many options available, it's easier to kind of opt out and to change paths because there's just like so many things around, right? When we grew up, like there was no maps. You couldn't go on your phone. You had to figure it out on the map, right? And then if you didn't know that, you need to ask directions. There was like you had to be active participant in finding out how you were going to go navigate things. It wasn't that simple, and I really appreciated the fact that my dad really leaned into that, and I think it can be a huge differentiator for Devin if he leans into it, because all the rest of the people are going to be trying to find the easiest route, and so that's definitely something I would I would think that my dad taught me, and I'm trying to impart that same wisdom for him.
Lead by example.
Yeah, he definitely led by example.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cameron Cox, 12 News, Larry.
Cam,
Good to see you.
man, thank you for the note, man. I somebody sent it to me. It was very kind of you to write that letter, so thank you. I wanted to, thank you.
I was going back through some of the archives, and I know some of your favorite moments of your career was being at your locker with us every Thursday, and us asking you about retirement, and asking you about reflecting on your career, and always pushing down the road. I'm sure you've had a chance to reflect maybe a little bit about your career. What do you think about your time in the NFL with the Cardinals? And is there something you are most proud of?
Most proud of? That's tough. I'm really proud of the work that we've done in the community. The organizations we partner with. I'm proud of the relationships I've developed with my teammates, coaching staff, administration, media. Like, those things are what I really think about. Not often do I think about the catches and the touchdowns. I think about the authenticity of the relationships I was able to develop. Almost behind you, right? And his dad was our first athletic trainer, and first time I got cussed out in a game from his dad, I was messing with him. I made a joke that he didn't like, and he just unleashed on me. And like, those are the memories. And Machine, I remember spraining my ankle in the training room, and Machine told me to tape an aspirin on my ankle, and I'm thinking to myself, like, what does that even mean? And like, all these lessons that these old wily veterans that have been in the game for a long time teach a 20-year-old kid who thought he had all the answers. And so, like, those are the memories that as you get older, you look back and think, man, like, those are times that kind of shape you who you were as an individual, right? And they didn't always have to do with, like I said, catches and yards and wins and losses, but it was just like life examples. And so I think those are the memories that I'll always look back on that really resonate with me. Tape an aspirin, that's what he tell me. Tape an aspirin. Yeah. It's like, do you mean that I should take it? Or is like, I just completely did not understand what that meant.
Fitz, congratulations to be here.
Omo, I'm disappointed in you, man. You ain't come to the party, man. I do it in Arizona. You big time, man.
Family vacation.
No, I sent it out early enough for you could have rescheduled the family vacation. No, I'm just messing.
So, first of all, my dad sees that he wanted to be here so badly, but he is proud of you as a person, proud of you as a player. You are the 10th Hall of Famer that he was a trainer for, so
wow.
I think that's a pretty cool number to be. Even cooler if it was 11.
Yeah.
My question is this. I've covered your whole career. I've heard players be amazing at how many people you know outside of football. Justin Hugh mentioned one time, because he even has a tree guy. He hooked me up when he was looking for trees for his front yard. So at what point in your career did you realize that relationships outside of football were important?
I mean, from as early as I could ever remember, it's 7, 8 years old. I've always had a natural ability to, find connectivity with people and feel like, and, the older you get, the more introspective and curious and that you become, the more you learn, and like the more you lean into people, and the more people lean into you, and you just naturally start to develop, relationships across the board, from, botanists at flower shops, and, just very random and weird, things that people would never, understand. I was talking to my boy, Drew, the other day, and he enriches uranium, right? And like, who knows about that and why people are doing that? But like, those are the things that really interest me. People are really, I'm a Hall of Fame football player, and the rest of you guys are Hall of Fame journalists, and things that you find passion and love in, right? And I think that we all have, innate skill sets that we've cultivated and grown into things that we can appreciate and put food on our table. And I genuinely enjoy, learning about others and the things that make them tick and, make them happy. Yeah. Tell Pops I said hello. Thank you.
Craftsmanship to us is 60 years of pride and dedication.
Passed down from generation to generation.
The hardwood floors that your kids take their first steps on.
the solid wood doors you quietly close at night.
The things we create day in and day out are the products that end up turning your house into a home.
At Baird Brothers Fine Hardwoods, uncompromising quality and craftsmanship built our business.
And it will keep us moving forward for generations to come.
Floor. Drew Brees. Thank you, sir.
All right.
Hey,
Good.
Drew, congrats,
Yeah,
bud.
thank you.
I know this is a Pro Football Hall of Fame, but just as we talked about the foundation that was planted in West Lafayette.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Texas kid, grew up in Austin. Never thought I'd leave the state of Texas, to be quite honest. All my family was there. Had a lot of roots there. But wanted to play college athletics, and I always thought it would be baseball. It ended up being football, and my opportunities coming out were Purdue, Kentucky, and Brown. And I chose Purdue because of its academic reputation, playing in the Big Ten. Very quickly you realize all the incredible things about Purdue. I was very quickly, I learned about the cradle of quarterbacks. That's something that still probably a lot of people don't recognize about the university, and the strong tradition of quarterbacks going back to Len Dawson, of course, Bob Greasy, Mike Phipps, Gary Danielson, Mark Herman, Jim Everett, Scott Campbell, and then when Joe Tiller got there in 1997 and began recruiting Texas again, which there was a stint where Purdue really wasn't going down and recruiting Texas. And then that brought me up to Purdue, and then Kyle Orton came on the heels of me, and then Curtis Painter. So I think we've had about 10 NFL quarterbacks out of Purdue University. So if you want to be a quarterback or an astronaut, go to Purdue. But it was honestly, it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. Was coming up to West Lafayette, Indiana. Not only did I get an incredible education, but some of my best friends in the world are my college roommates and guys that I played with. I met my wife, Brittany. Just the Purdue family. Everywhere I go, I meet Purdue people, and not only do I meet them, but they are so proud to be Purdue alumni. So I think just the reputation that Purdue has around the country in regards to the quality of the academic degrees, but just the leadership positions that so many Purdue alumni hold around the country. It's just it makes me really proud to have had the opportunity to go there. Yes. Oh, you're good. I can hear you.
Congratulations. The preparation leading into this week, has it all been comparable to game prep?
To game prep? I'd say that, well, first off, it's so much to plan for, and my wife has really spearheaded, so much of the preparation in regards to helping family and friends and everybody get here and, make their arrangements, but also planning the party, which the party is really like a massive wedding reception, and I think what we've been told is that, it's going to be 5 days that's just a total blur, but really try to enjoy the moment. I think that's what I've tried to tell myself is, you work so hard and stress so much leading up to the moment to make sure that it's right for everybody who's coming here to be a part of this celebration with you. The way I really look at it is, this is my opportunity to convey my appreciation and gratitude to so many of the people, the places that were a part of this journey. And that's what I'm most looking forward to, is all the people I'm going to have a chance to see and appreciate and let them know just how valued they are. And also, every interaction I have with the current Hall of Famers is, it just sinks in even more and more just what an incredible honor this is, and just what the game of football has meant to, not just to me in my life, but to so many people and to so many communities. It just reinforces what an incredible game this is.
Congratulations, Corey Kupfer with WQED. When this class was announced back in February, you had some really nice things to say about Roger Craig and his gameplay. Do you still feel that way? And what does it mean to have him part of this class?
Nothing's changed. Yeah, Roger Craig was a pioneer in this game at the running back position. The West Coast offense is one that really revolutionized the offensive football in the NFL with Bill Walsh. And then you look at all the West Coast disciples, that came, after that, the Mike Holmgrens, and John Gruden's and Sean Payton's and so many others. And, I remember watching that grainy footage, when I was early in my career. We'd pull up the old film, that was whatever, the 8mm that was transferred to VHS, that was transferred to Beta, that was eventually made its way onto our hard drives and we were able to access, And, you're sitting there watching the OGs, the guys who really revolutionized offensive football. And Roger Craig was at the center of that. Because the running back position was so versatile in those offenses, not just handing the ball to inside, outside, but just what the role they played in the passing game, and the way that, as we used to say, the offensive game, the passing game became an extension of the run game in the way that you were able to get the ball out of your hands quickly into your playmakers' hands and allow them to go front up the defense and make plays. And Roger Craig was, that first thousand guy that I think many running backs that came through those systems modeled themselves after.
How you doing, Drew? Tom Long with Ford Ops TV and the Disability Channel. Being 100% disabled veteran, knowing all the things that you used to do with the USO, what was your favorite moment with the USO? Do you miss it? And are you going to be looking forward to doing some more things with veterans?
Absolutely. I have such a profound respect for our military community, all those who serve, all those who have served, and sacrificed so much for our country and for this world. Some of my greatest memories over the last 20 years from my playing days were the opportunities to go on many of those USO trips. I went on 5 of them to 10 different countries. And the experiences that I had, just the interactions with troops. First off, so many of them are massive football fans. And you feel like you playing on Sundays was a representation of them. They would be getting up at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, wherever they were in the world, to watch their favorite teams play or their favorite players play. And so it just gave them a taste of home and a connection to home. And so just to hear those stories was awesome. And then what was really great too on those USO trips is they were very proud about what they did, what they've been trained to do. And so they would want to bring you along and allow you to experience all those things. And so I had a chance to do some really fun things with the military. Riding in the back of a Chinook helicopter over Afghanistan with my feet just kind of dangling off the back like I was on the back of a Ford pickup truck or something. To running obstacle courses in Djibouti, Africa, to getting up early in the morning in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and doing PT with the Marines. And that's where a lot of the inspiration for some of our pregame chants came from. In fact, the one that everybody's probably most familiar with, the 1, 2, win for you, 3, 4, win some more, that was truly birthed from PT with the Marines at Guantanamo Bay. Early in the morning, running, sweating, and they're just barking out those cadence. And I'm just sitting there thinking in my mind, I am taking this back to my team. And sure enough, we go and win the Super Bowl that year. And so that one will live forever.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Continuers Eddie West Coast Gazette. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask, you had an absolute shootout with the Cardinals and Larry Fitzgerald back in 2016. You played against Luke a ton, Adam Vinatieri. What's it like to now go from playing against them to now going side by side with them in the Hall of Fame?
Yeah. It's incredible. I don't know if there's a player I have more respect for in the league than Luke Kuechly. And obviously I played against him twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year when he was with the Panthers. And it was always, I never had to prepare harder for a team than when I knew I was going up against a Kuechly-led defense. He was that type of player, and you could tell he was that type of leader and that type of teammate too, just the way the guys would respond to him. Just a generational type player. And so I always felt like, he certainly brought out the best, in me, because I knew we had to just be so on point when we played against him, or he would ruin our day. Larry Fitzgerald has always been one of my favorite guys in the league. We've always had a real special bond and friendship. It was funny because the thing I most looked forward to in the Pro Bowl was to play with Larry, because I knew they were going to never let him out of Arizona, and I wasn't going anywhere either. So I knew that was my only chance to throw to my guy. So we had some great Pro Bowl moments together, and then we would do a lot of things in the off season. And then Adam Vinatieri, hard to believe, the guy really had a Hall of Fame career with two different teams. When you really break it down, his longevity, how long he played, how clutch he was. He was a part of some of the biggest moments in Super Bowl history. That's pretty awesome when you look at the class. Obviously paired with Roger Craig, and what he meant to that Niners organization for so long, especially during a lot of their championship runs, and how he revolutionized the game. It's an incredible class, and I'm honored to be a part of it. Yeah.
First of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
I was just wondering, you said you picked New Orleans because it had a great fan base and a great atmosphere. Can you explain what it was like when Gleason blocked that punt against the Falcons?
Yeah. Well, what's funny is, like, if you ever just put a camera on me or watched me while the other team was punting, I was always at the other end of the field because we're waiting for the punt to come down to our end, and I was always kind of like stretching and just getting my mind right, and especially in that moment because that was our first game ever in the Superdome for many of us, and obviously just the gravity of the moment. It's Monday Night Football. We're undefeated. We're playing against the Falcons. They were the division winner the year before. They're a great team. And so you're just, you're just trying to block out, a lot of what would be perceived as pressure and just focus on your job and focus on the moment. And I just kind of glanced down, and just all of a sudden there's this, what sounded like a shotgun blast, as Gleason was blocking that punt and the ball hitting his hands. And just the eruption of the crowd. It was as if the roof was going to blow off the dome. And then the feeling of what that represented, it was, I think it was a message to the country, to the world, to everybody that, New Orleans was going to come back stronger than ever. And that we as a team were a representation, of our city. And it was, I'd say, next to the Super Bowl, the greatest moment in the history of Saints football.
Hey, Drew, Juan K from Fox 8. How proud are you of the longevity that you put into the league, 2 decades? And are there any moments that stand out above the others over the 20 years, especially the last 15 moments?
Yeah, it's each year stands alone in regards to the team that we had, the mindset in each off season, the things that I was personally working on, what was happening in free agency, what happened in the drafts, watching the team come together. The highs, the lows, all the moments that went into creating what became the team that then, you ended up going through the season with. And yet, you develop such a routine, and you just develop these habits. And, so much of my thought process, each and every off season was like, how do you create so much chemistry and connectivity with the guys that are on your side of the ball, and then the team, the team dynamics. How are we feeding off each other? How are we complementing each other? To me, that's really where a lot of the magic lies on a team. Is just how you build that chemistry, and how you build those relationships, and how you build that trust. And so, while there's the X's and O's of the game, and while there's the the things that, every player is working on just for their own personal development. Like, to me, that was it was the challenge. It was the fun part. It's what got, like, the fire burning was every off season, sitting there looking around at the rest of the guys and just seeing, like, pieces to the puzzle, and, like, how do we all put this together in a way that's going to allow us to go do something great, do something special, do something that's never been done before. That was the exciting part.
Hey Drew, Sean Brick, WZIP, University of Akron. You started your career with the Chargers, shoulder injury, and then ultimately Chargers drafted Philip Rivers. What from the experience of you going to the Saints and that revitalizing your career, winning the Super Bowl, just what did you learn from that experience?
Well, when we all got there in 2006, like, if you really start breaking down, a lot of the moves that were made, it's pretty unbelievable. Sean Payton was a first-year head coach who had, been with Bill Parcells in Dallas for the previous, I believe, 4 seasons, and had certainly kind of grown and developed, as into a great offensive coordinator. Had, was kind of creating his own identity as a head coach. He had these influences from John Gruden and influences from Parcells and that sort of thing, but he was also, formulating, who he was going to be as a head coach and the type of players that he wanted to bring in. But I mean, man, there were challenges, a lot of, you had to really have a vision. Not just for the guys that you wanted, but for the guys who were looking at New Orleans saying, man, I'm going to a place that literally was devastated, 6 months previous. And there was all kinds of doubts. And, in some cases, I look at the very first free agent signing that year was Scott Fujita. Scott Fujita was a linebacker who had been drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs. I had played against them when I was with the Chargers. And then Fujita had gone to Dallas for a short stint, hadn't really had a chance to play. And so, Scott's kind of looking for a home and maybe not a lot of options. And it's like, okay, well, I'll follow Sean Payton to, New Orleans. And then it was me. And then all of a sudden it was like that these pieces just started coming together. And it was, in some cases, it was a trade. We traded our center with Charles Bentley, and we get Jeff Fain, from the Cleveland Browns, who, again, hadn't played very much, and all, he's going to be our center. And then Hollis Thomas was part of a trade later with Philadelphia. And then, we trade for Scott, we get Scott Shanley, and we get Terrence Copper. And like all of a sudden, Reggie Bush falls to us with the second pick. And so you just think about all the things that happen. We draft Jari Evans, we draft Zach Strief, we draft Marcus Colston. So Roman Harper, man, that was quite a draft. Like what those guys became, not just as players, but as leaders and as members of the community and as just pieces to this incredible fabric that became, the foundation of our team and our program. Like even after those guys, retired or went other places, the foundation was built and they built it. And I think that's one of the things I'm most proud of. Obviously I had a chance to play a really long time. And so I was the part of a lot of different, teams and generations of teams, throughout the course of that period of time. But it all goes back to the foundation that was built from that really 06 to 09 group that came in, whether by trade, whether by choice, whether by draft, and fulfilled that vision that Sean and Mickey Loomis, our general manager, had for what we could create there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Nathan Brown with the Indianapolis Star. I know you spoke earlier about your appreciation for playing for Purdue in college. Was there one particular lesson or a couple of lessons that you felt like helped set the foundation for your career in the NFL?
At Purdue? Well, first off, the Big Ten Conference is, at that time was coming off of a national championship in '97 with Michigan, '98. I guess that was Tennessee, but like you had Wisconsin, you had Penn State, you had Michigan, you had Ohio State, you had Michigan State. I mean, you had 5 or 6 teams in the Big Ten at the time that were top 15 in the country. We played Notre Dame every year, top 15 in the country. So you just looked at the level of competition, number one, and you were playing against the best of the best. And so week in and week out, I'd really say in many cases we were an underdog. You know, so you were always having to punch above your fight rate. Like you were having to scratch and claw and just play with this giant chip on your shoulder. And so I think that alone was what helped, I think, mold and strengthen a lot of us. Like we always felt like we had something to prove. And we always felt like we had an opportunity to, you know, be David in a David and Goliath story, right? Couple that with this offensive style of football that was, you know, throwing the ball 50 times a game, you know, which nowadays that may not seem like a big deal, but at the time in the late 90s, the opportunity to do something like that, just think how much you can develop. You know, you're throwing the ball that much, that means you're having to understand coverage. You know, offensively, the system was putting a lot in my hands in regards to, you know, changing and getting to certain plays, having to recognize where the problems would lie in protection and then how you combat that. You know, putting a premium on completions because we're a high pass offense. So again, it's like the pass is an extension of the run. You know, they put a lot in my hands as far as running the football, you know, so it's a lot of QB draws, it's a lot of read options and RPOs and different things. And so I just felt like what I was exposed to was putting a lot on my plate and forcing me to have to learn very quickly and then be in control and command of the game. And then couple that with the fact that you're just playing against some of the best players and best teams in the country week in and week out. I think it just kind of put us all on the fast track to, you know, very quickly develop and make us NFL ready.
Last question. Hey, Drew, congratulations. Troy Davis from Spotlight Media, YSN. Hey, your career kind of matches your book and coming back stronger from where you played to who you are and what you've done. Where inside of Drew Brees does that come from? I mean, what is the battle back, the comeback, the bringing your teammates along, the bringing communities coming back stronger? Where's that coming from?
You know, I came from a very competitive family background. You know, I had a lot of athletes in my family going back to my grandparents. I also came from a military background from that perspective, in that, you know, I had grandparents and family members who served in our military. And so I think there was always this feeling of service, of sacrifice, of, you know, being a part of something greater than yourself, being a great member of a team, being a great teammate, but also just this love of sports and competition. And so you combine all those things together. You know, I was a kid who just could not get enough of playing ball. You know, whatever it was, you name the sport, I wanted to play it. Thank goodness I had a little brother who was my running mate, and we just did these things together, you know, all day long. And so as I look at my childhood, it was nothing but being in competitive situations with teammates that I love to be around. And inevitably, you find yourself in situations where, you know, maybe you're outmatched and you're kind of having to figure it out and you're having to overcome adversity, and you just you learn so much from that. Like that sharpens you, but it also gives you a belief and a confidence that no matter what, you know, with the right people and with the right mindset, you can find a way. And, you know, think about how that mindset applies to anything in life. And I look to, you know, I went to a high school program that was a very well-known high school program in the state of Texas, but we had never won a state championship. And I remember we had a special group of seniors, and we said, let's be the first ones to go win a state championship for our high school. And sure enough, we were able to do that. I show up at Purdue University. We're dead last in the Big Ten my freshman year as far as a recruiting class. And we all look at each other and say, by the time we leave here, we're going to be Big Ten champs. And we were, right? Show up in San Diego and we were 1-15 the year before. They had the first pick in the draft. And they draft LaDainian Tomlinson. They bring me in the second round. And we look at each other and said, by the time we leave here, we're going to be champs. 3 years later, we're division champs. And you get to New Orleans coming off Katrina, it never had, a ton of success. And, let's win one for this city. And then we win one. So I don't know, I guess just every step of the way, it's always been, there's a new set of challenges, there's a new goal, and yet that mindset of, belief and confidence and, developing trust and chemistry and camaraderie with the guys around you, and then just feeling like you can do anything together. That's what it's all about.
All right, thank you.
You got it.
Your teams work hard and give it all they've got. Well, so does ours, because 21 Sports and YSN give you extra effort when covering local sports. 21 Sports and YSN, winning coverage of our Valley's teams.
What's up, guys? Hey, how are you? Good. You got a good color on right now.
I'll start with choosing your presenter.
Yeah.
When did you know? And why was it important that it be your father?
Well, I think for me it was an easy choice. My dad, really my mom and my dad have been the best role models, the best example. They've provided so much for my two brothers and I, that from how to treat people to how to work hard, how to take ownership from making mistakes to sacrificing for us. We never needed anything growing up, and we never needed to look too far for how to do things. My mom and dad were about as consistent of parents as you can get, and they did everything in their power to provide us the opportunity to have success. And so when that situation came up, it was kind of, if I didn't do my mom or my dad, then I was probably doing the wrong thing. So it was probably the easiest decision that I've had to make the last 6 months. Thank you.
You look to your left, Chris Lee from WRAL in Raleigh, North Carolina. While you're not the first Carolina Panthers to go into the Hall of Fame, you are the only Carolina Panthers to only played your career with the Panthers there in the Hall of Fame. You're still involved with Charlotte and in the community, and also with coaching, just different things that you do. What has the Carolinas meant to you throughout your playing career, but even now, after your playing career, to get you here to the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, I think, I don't think it could have ended up in a better situation than I was in Carolina. I think from the organization to, Marty and Ron and Sean McDermott, the defensive coordinator, to the community in general, I think they welcomed me to the Carolinas. They welcomed me to the Carolina Panthers, and there's been nothing but support from the community since I got there, whether it was when I first got there as a rookie, or I was in year 4, or after, we went to the Super Bowl, or whether it was we were having a bad season. Regardless of the situation, you'd see people out and about, and everybody was always so supportive, and you just felt comfortable. You felt like you were in a safe space, and it was a really special place for me to end up. And then, when I finished playing a couple years ago, even now moving forward, the city of Charlotte and the Carolinas in general have given me every opportunity that I could have ever wanted to stay involved in the community and stay involved in the game of football, from, Dave and Nicole Tepper giving me the opportunity to work in the radio booth, or, that everybody else knows that Greg and Stu and I coach over at Charlotte Christian have the opportunity to do that, to, the support from all the people from the Carolina Panthers that are here today. I just think it's a place where I came as a 21-year-old kid, and they wrapped their arms around me and gave me an opportunity to enjoy a game that I love and live a childhood dream. Yep.
Luke Kuechly,
Yep.
WCAC, congratulations. I wonder, being here in Canton, I think you visited this museum as a kid. I think you played it on this field. As you reflect on everything from that point to this point, what do you think of?
Darren Gant wrote a lot of good articles on it. All the information's in there. This is a really cool place. The Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio is special to me for a lot of reasons. Number one, I'm from Cincinnati. And I've been here multiple times throughout my career. I came here, like you said, when I was was a little kid in grade school, and we came up, and I walked through these buildings and saw, you know, Super Bowl rings and jerseys and old cleats and gloves, and, you know, you think maybe one day I can play in the NFL, one day I can play in high school, one day I can play in college. You never think in a million years that you'd be sitting up here doing this. And then when I was, I don't know if I was in 8th grade or in high school or some point, I came up and watched a state championship game. And then my freshman year in high school at St. Xavier, we came and the St. Xavier Bombers played Massillon in the state championship game out at, it was Fawcett Field. I know it's Benson Field now. And then as a junior in high school, we played up here in the state championship game. And now, you know, we're here now. It's kind of a full circle experience on my football career. And it's just, it's a special place for a lot of reasons. I love the game of football and the history behind it. And it's given me so many opportunities, and to be here now is really cool.
Hey, Luke Kuechly from WRL in Raleigh. You're notorious for your game prep and your film work, and there's a notebook right now of yours, the Hall of Fame. It gives some insight into it. Do you remember that specific notebook and what they chose? And can you give some insight into why you were so obsessive with your prep?
Well, I think, you know, you always try to find advantages that happen before Sunday, right? So can I prepare in practice? Can I prepare in meeting rooms? Can I prepare in the off season and make sure that my body's ready to roll for games? And, you know, you look for those advantages, and then some of them work, some of them don't work, but some of them that worked really well for me was the ability to prepare and ability to watch tape and anticipate. And I think a lot of that started at St. Xavier High School with Steve Speck. We used to watch, you know, VHS tape with Speck in his office eating lunch. And then on the Boston College, I watched a lot of tape with a guy named Les Davis. And you start to see the advantage of, hey, I've seen this in a previous game, and you can put yourself in that situation. So if it's, you know, these guys are on the field, it's 3rd and 7, here's their top 4 pass concepts, here's what we might be on defense, how do we match up against it? And then you can kind of play through that scenario in your mind before the ball gets snapped. And then when you kind of turn around and the ball gets snapped during the games, I've sat next to Thomas for 20 hours that week talking about this route against Drew Brees and the Saints, and we're in this coverage, how do we want to do it? And the ball gets snapped and they run that route, and we're in this coverage, and we've already talked about it. And I think, you know, everybody does things different ways, but I think the best thing for me and how I remember things is I vocalize them and I write them down. And the more I write stuff down and the more I talk about it, the more I remember it. So I think a lot of it for me was when I would watch stuff and prepare meetings, our coaches always did a great job of talking through situational football and what to expect and how they're going to attack us and their top concepts. And I would remember all of that by writing it down. And I think that was the advantage of the notebook for me, was I had a system that worked for me. And like I said, the more I talked about it and the more I wrote it down with my hand, the more I remembered it.
First of all, congratulations. Been with 10K Sports Talk Radio in Minneapolis. You've always been regarded as one of the smartest players on the field while playing. Recently, you came out saying when being too smart sucks, and you overthought the salt and pepper play call.
Yeah.
Has there been any other play call or scheme that has just confused you while playing?
We played in Atlanta. I don't remember when it was. It might have been. It was probably I want to say it was 2018. And they had run a run play the previous couple of weeks out of a formation and a personnel grouping and kind of an area on the field. And I was like, we're going to get this run. This run traditionally gives me problems. And they had a really good center, Alex Mack. So it was kind of a perfect storm of, I've seen it multiple weeks in a row. I understand the formation. We're going to be lined up very similarly to the team that they were playing. And I was sitting on this play all game, and they probably lined up in that formation 6, 7, 8 times during that game, and they never ran that run play one time. And I remember towards the end of the game, the official actually came up to me and he kind of asked, like, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, why?" And he said, "You look like you're waiting for something that's not coming." And I said, "You know what? I'm glad you said that to me, because I knew something was a little bit off today." And I had sat on a run play the whole game and they never ran it. And I remember telling him that. I remember after the game, I kept telling myself that, hey, your job is to anticipate But at the end of the day, your job is to react to what goes on, right? I can't wish Matt Ryan to run this run play during the game because they're gonna do whatever they want. So I gotta line up, I gotta do my job, I gotta have my eyes in the right place. I can anticipate, I can feel, I can lean, but when the ball gets snapped, I gotta go to where do I need to go? And it happened multiple times throughout my career, but that was one that sticks out to me right now was against Atlanta at home. They lined up in this one formation and they never ran this run play one time. And I remember the official came up to me and said, are you okay? And I said, yeah. And he explained to me why he asked. And it made a lot of sense to me because I was kind of feeling the same thing.
Hey, Luke. Myself, amongst, a lot of my buddies growing up, grew up on that 15-1, 2015 Panthers team. Just, in your opinion, what made that team so special and just how fun was it to be a part of that team? Guys like Cam Newton, all those guys that made that run Super Bowl.
I think there's a lot of things that we could talk about as far as what made that team special. But I think the people and the guys and the relationships on that team was what made it special. And what I mean by that is we had really good older veteran guys that were our best players. So, Greg and Ryan and Thomas and Stu and Charles Johnson and Cam was getting up there going, I think Cam was in year 5. Our best players were our best leaders. The way they practiced, the way they played, the way they prepared. But our best players and our best leaders, Greg and Ryan and Stu and Cam and Chuck and TD, were also great people and formed relationships with guys on teams and kept everything light and fun and enjoyable. And then what we did that I thought was really good is we added some really good pieces. You added Charles Tillman. I mean, the best dude in the world that could still play Roman Harper, Kurt Coleman. We brought Luke Kuechly. And so we brought all these older veteran guys in that came into our locker room and were like, these dudes are awesome because the stage and the culture that those guys set that I initially talked about. So between the guys that were there for a long time, the Gregs and Ryans and Stews and Cams and TD and all those guys, we had a great veteran leaders right there. And then the guys that we introduced that offseason with, Roman was there the year before, but Kurt and Peanut, we brought Jared Allen in. Our older guys in that team set the tone for what was acceptable, what was fun, how to have fun. And Ron did a really good job of letting us be ourselves. He had a great feel for the room. He had a great feel for the team. He did a really good job of kind of creating like a box that was always moving, but as long as we stayed in the box, we were okay. And he let us be ourselves. And there was no one was rushing to get out of there during the week. Everybody wanted to stay and hang out, and guys would watch tape, guys would lift, guys would watch tape together, guys would screw around in the locker room and have a great time. And we had great people that loved being around each other, and Cam Newton was awesome that year, won the MVP. So we had a coach that understood his players, and we had players that understood the mission of our coaches giving us an opportunity to kind of run the team we want. We have to have respect for that and do it the right way.
I'm Josh Wine, plus with ESPN. Did the fear of CT contribute to you walking away when you did? Is it still a concern at all?
No.
Oh.
Yep.
Hey, Anthony Rossetti, West Coast Gazette. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
I have to ask, you guys played the Cardinals in the playoffs against Larry Fitz. You guys obviously played Drew Brees. What's it mean for you to be able to get inducted after playing against them?
I think it's cool for a lot of reasons. You look at this class, right? And, the having the opportunity to play against Drew has been phenomenal. Inside the division twice a year, we played him once in the playoffs. Him and I have such a fun, competitive history together. He's the best player that I've ever played against, and to have the opportunity to end my career, my last game I ever played was at Bank of America Stadium against Drew. So to get in with Drew is unbelievable. A guy I watched since I was a little kid, and have the opportunity to play against him and be here now with him is phenomenal. Same thing with Larry. My first game against Larry was down in the desert in 2013, my second year, and we played down there. They played up against us. We played on playoff games, and Larry and I have found ourselves in a lot of the same the same rooms and situations and throughout my whole career. So it's cool to go in with guys that, number one, you play against, and then number two, that you've spent a lot of time together with. And same thing with Adam. You know, I grew up watching the Colts, being from Cincinnati, and watching Adam, and the career that he had not only with the Colts but in New England was phenomenal. And the consistency that he had was it's amazing. And then, you know, Roger, you know, you learn a lot about what kind of teammate guys are, and all the guys from that 49ers team have always, you know, you talk to a bunch of them throughout this process, and they talk about that team didn't go without Roger and what he was able to do, not only on the ground, but, you know, obviously it's well documented. Roger's the first guy to go 1,000. So his opportunities that he provided for, you know, Jerry and, you know, all those guys was fantastic, and his joy that him and his family have. And if you watch all those knock episodes, you can watch, you know, those guys knock on that door for him, and how excited. Obviously Roger was beyond excited, but those guys were more excited than he was that he was getting in, and that just shows you everything about the type of teammate that he was.
Hey, Luke Kuechly, congratulations, Luke. I just want to talk about some of those NFC South battles. One of them was a singular play against another guy who looks like he's in the Hall of Fame soon, Julio Jones.
Yeah.
How did you get matched up on Julio Jones?
Dang, you guys are throwing daggers, man.
Is that broken coverage, or
dang, man. What happened there?
Yeah.
It was quarters, and they went to empty. And when you go quarters to empty, I got the guy down the middle of the field, and so I had to run with Julio down the field. And Matt, fortunately for Julio, saw that and decided that he liked his matchup down the field a little bit more than I liked the matchup down the field. And obviously, since you asked the question, you know what the result was, and it was a win for the Atlanta Falcons and Julio Jones.
Hey, Luke, congratulations to Corey Kuechly of the QED. You just answered a lot of what I want to know about Roger, but with him being in that West Coast offense and taking advantage of linebackers, you being a linebacker, would you like to play against him?
I think the competitor inside you always wants to play against the best, and I think it's kind of cool. Roger was a little bit before his time in that aspect, and you look around the NFL now, there's a lot of guys that, whether or not they want to believe it, their game mimics what Roger does. You know, you look at, you know, obviously Christian in San Francisco it's actually really cool. I've had the opportunity to play with Christian, and in his career has been unbelievable. A guy that can beat you on the ground and in the air. And you look at a couple of the best guys in the NFL right now with Bijan Robinson. He can do everything, and Jahmyr Gibbs, same thing. And you know, those guys are looked at now as the cream of the crop. But the guy that started that first was Roger. So as the competitor in you would love to have the opportunity to play against him. But those guys, especially when Roger's playing the size that he was, you don't want those guys anywhere near you in space. And so maybe it's better that. It was better I got to hear about the tales of Roger Craig rather than playing against him.
Jim Lewis, 3275 in News Stitch Media. So my first question for you is going to be, how does it feel to be the first player from Boston College in 57 years to be inducted into the Hall of Fame?
Oh, it's phenomenal. It's Ernie Stautner or Donovan, I think, are the other two defensive guys. So no, it's really cool, and I think I owe a lot of my career to what I learned at BC from, I think, really how the game was played up there. With when I got up there, is very similar to when I got to Carolina. The standard for how to play the game was already set. You know, the two guys that were in that room were Mike McLaughlin and Mark Herzlich, and I talked about this guy a lot. His name's Wes Davis. He played safety for us when I was there for, I think it was 2 years. Wes was a couple years older than I was. But, you know, I walked into that linebacking room, and the position coach his name was Bill McGovern, and coaching forever, a Jersey guy. And he was tough and a great coach and loved the game of football and would coach you, which I think is phenomenal. But the other thing that he did that I think is even more important than all of that was he formed such great relationships with the guys in the team, and he cared and loved about all of them. And so you see, you know, on one side, here's this guy that you can clearly tell that he loves the game of football. He loves to coach. He's smart. He's passionate, and he will coach you, which I think I always wanted that. But then on the other side of it, it wasn't a one-way street. It was, I'm going to get on you and I'm going to coach you, but then I'm also going to form a relationship where you know that I care about you. So I think that was one thing that I learned moving forward, that I took with me, that I learned at St. Xavier with Steve Speck and a lot of guys. But you see the value of the relationship side of the game. And then you looked at, Mark Herzlich and Mike McLaughlin were the older guys in a room that had tons of success and were really good players, all ACC, all American, the whole nine. And they were willing to help young guys and talk to young guys and mentor young guys and coach them up. And, hey, this is how we do it. And this is why. And hey, try this, not that. And then they also set a really good standard for how things were done on the field. So, you got there and you always watched the older guys and how did the older guys do things. And Mac was full speed and gave great effort and was tough and physical and worked his butt off in the weight room and was a great dude. So you walk in and the same thing, hers was the same way. So you walk in the room and your position coach, Govs, was awesome. And then you watch these two guys and you watch them on the field, in the meeting rooms, in the classroom, out at school, in the weight room. It's like, all right, well, if I want to have success, I want to be like those guys. And then I've talked a lot about Wes. He wasn't in our room. He was the room next to us. He taught me the value of watching tape and how to watch it, why to watch it, why to watch it with other people, and the value of that. And so I think when I got to BC, you learn, toughness, intensity, passion, love for the game, understanding of the game, how to form relationships, the value of preparation and working together as a group. And I mean, how much time you got to keep going on what I learned from, and I think the Jesuit leaning at BC, that helped a lot too. Just a place where love and respect and treating people the right way and doing things the right way and how you treat people is really, at the end of the day, the most important thing. I think that's kind of, in a nutshell, what I learned at BC.
Hey, Luke.
What's up, Scott?
How are you?
Good.
You got to personalize your Hall of Fame exhibit with some things that were special
Yeah.
to you. And I wonder if you could go through a few of those
Yeah.
things in your mind and why you chose those as that.
All right, so let's see here. So I got my helmet, I got my shoulder pads. That's pretty straightforward. The gloves. Okay, so here's something interesting, Scott, would be the cleats that I wore. I remember when I came in from DC, we were a Reebok school and then we were an Under Armour school. So then you get to Carolina and they have, you go to the equipment room and there's 15 pairs of cleats that you can choose from, and it was like playland. So I tried a couple of different pairs and I finally settled on the ones that I really liked, and that I wore the same model of cleat from, not the same cleat, but the same model of cleat from the first game I ever played in Carolina to the last game that I ever played in Carolina. So, people, you can say that you're superstitious, or maybe I'm anal, or I just liked how they felt, or they were comfortable. I don't know what it was, but I felt like the cleat that I wore my whole career in Carolina deserved to be there. I think my shoulder pads were next to your helmet. I think that's your most important thing. I think the notebook that I put in there is obviously, that was my prized possession during the week. And it's funny when you read through that notebook, because sometimes you write things down in there that, you write down all the the plays and formations and all that stuff, but sometimes you write down how you're gonna approach the game. And I think one of the things I wrote down in that notebook was I was on a bad streak of being very frustrated about something. I don't remember what it was, but I wrote in there, relax, have fun. And there were other things that I wrote in that book and books throughout my career that you wonder, and it takes you back to that moment of, we're playing this team in this moment. I wrote like be a good teammate, relax, have fun, communicate, and get excited for people. And it takes you back to those moments of, what was I thinking about? Why was I saying that? And then it kind of jogs your memory and boom, this is the reason why. So I had that. I think I had a football in there. Was it from the Thanksgiving game, Scott? Do you have it all written down? I think, the collar, yeah, so the football, I think, was from the Thanksgiving game. I just remember how fun that game was and how fun that season was. In those blues, that was the first time I wore the blue jerseys. I think I put a black jersey in there. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. That was always one of my favorite jerseys was a black jersey, because you guys know, you and Joe know, that as the season went on, we would never wear black in the beginning of the year, because you'd be delusional to wear a black jersey in the South early in the season for home games, right? But as the season would go on, the grass would change. I think it would go from Bermuda to, I think it was rye grass they put, so you could start to see the change in the grass. And then Joe's laughing at me because I'm nerding out, but the grass would start to change. Dennis, our ground screw guy, was the man. And then as the grass would change, the weather would cool off, and then we'd switch from white jerseys to black jerseys. I think it was a black jersey, or maybe whatever, but it felt like playoff football, because it was like November, December, and cold, and it just felt like football. So there was that, and I'm sure there's some other things in there I'm missing. So.
Good to see you. Cam is a guy who will be eligible here next year.
Wow, is he really?
I'd be curious to hear one about his candidacy, but also maybe a specific example like you shared about that Atlanta game in 19 or 18, about a time or place where he made you better.
Oh, Cam, when he made me, I don't, let me think. Well, okay, we'll start with the first part of your question. I think you look at Cam, and when Cam was on the field, he was the best player on the field. He was the biggest, most physically dominant person on the field. And we used to walk out. I remember when we'd play, you play NFC teams, especially inside the division, they know who Cam is. But when you would go play AFC games and AFC teams, and they would come in and we'd go there and walk out for the coin toss, you could see the faces of the guys walking out like, oh my gosh, he's gigantic. And I felt like he got bigger on game days because, obviously he had his shoulder pads on, and later in his career at practice, he would just wear these like little shell things during practice. So then the only time he'd really have his pads on would be during games. He wore these big rib protectors. He had these like shin guards on, these like foam shin guards. And he was the biggest person on the field, and then he was dominant. And he could run past guys, through guys, around guys, jump over guys. He could throw the ball anywhere on the field. And when he was at his best, he was the best player on the field at all times. So I think, you look at, if I'm a team and I'm defending the Carolina Panthers, there's two guys that you have to worry about. I think, first of all, is Greg Olsen, because he can do everything. He can line up in the slot. He can put his hand in the ground. He can block anyone. He can run receiver routes, front side, back side, in the slot. And then Cam. Those are the two guys. And I think when you specifically have to game plan for guys, I think that tells the story for what it is. How do we get an extra guy in the box? How do we get a free runner at Cam? Hey, how do we cloud his vision so he can't throw the ball to Greg? I think that kind of speaks for itself. But I think, how did Cam make you better? I think in practice and in training camp, you think a lot about, hey, who are your matchups during training camp? And, one guy was Ryan Khalil at the center position, Stu. And then a lot of the time we spent in the passing game there was two guys, Cam and Greg. And to have the opportunity to play against Cam as much as I did during training camp and in practice, and have the opportunity to play against Greg as much as I did in training camp and in practice, both of those guys, there's nothing they couldn't do. And I think Greg, I'll get on Greg now, but Greg had a ton of pride in, I'll put my hand on the ground, I'll block some of these monster defensive ends, or you can split me out wide and I can run routes and beat DBs. Cam was the same way. How do you want me to beat you? And I think that was one thing that I had the luxury of with in Carolina was the dudes that I'd spent most of my time practicing against were some of the best players in the NFL.
Congratulations, Mike.
What's up, Mike?
Hey, how are you? Have you thought about how much of the current connective tissue that you have in this organization can impact this current iteration of the team? I mean, watching film with Trevin.
Yeah.
JJ is still playing, obviously.
Well, JJ's had more of an impact on me, which we can get to that. There we go.
But have you thought about there are guys who will make their debuts tonight in the NFL because you were in the Hall of Fame right now.
Yeah.
This weekend. I mean, Jackson, who grew up watching.
Yeah, Cincinnati guy.
Yeah, so have you thought about how much your legacy kind of impacts the current iteration of campus?
Well, I think the way you kind of started the question was how involved I still am with the team. And I think a lot of that goes to Dave and Nicole Tepper for giving me the opportunity not only to, do the radio, which is awesome. Jake and Anish and I and David Langdon, they're the best. We've got a great crew, but my ability to just come into the stadium and walk around and, go see the guys in the equipment room or, go upstairs and see Dan and Brent and, Coach Canales and all those guys. It's an open door, and I don't know if it's like that everywhere. Obviously, this is the only place that I ever played, but the ability that Dave and Nicole have given me to stay involved and be around and come in whenever I want and be a phone call away. I think, I'm sure, these guys are so excited to play tonight, but I think more than anything, I'm just very fortunate to have had an organization that Mr. Richardson drafted me, and now the Teppers are here now. And I feel like they've welcomed me with open arms, both families, and given me every opportunity that I've ever could have asked for to, number one, play the game, but now be involved with the team as I am now. I couldn't ask for a better situation, and I'm going to be standing on the field tonight, super jealous that those guys get to run around and go play football in the Carolina Panthers jersey. So, thanks, guys.
All right, thanks for joining us for the 2026 Hall of Fame press conference, where we're bringing in our new Hall of Famers into this class. Heard some great stories today, some great individuals, fantastic time with these guys. We look forward to sharing more with you this week throughout the Hall of Fame and their activities that YSN and Spotlight Media will be covering with Spotlight News and YSN Live. Thanks for joining us today.
YSN thanks you for watching this presentation of your sports network. For stories, stats, and more, go to ysnlive.com.